Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, please silence your cell phones and take your seats. The program will begin shortly. Please welcome Blake Truitt, Associate Publisher at National Journal.
Good morning. I'm Blake Truitt, Associate Publisher at National Journal, and I'm pleased to welcome you to National Journal's conversation with the U.S. Secretary of Labor. Before we begin, a couple of bits of light housekeeping. Another reminder to please silence your phones, but do keep them out. We encourage your involvement via social media using the hashtag NJConversation. Secondly, for the audience Q&A portion, please use the microphones on stands around the room, or you may submit your question via Twitter at any point during the program using hashtag AskNJ. If you are asking your question live here in the room, please do tell us your name as well as the name of your organization. This morning, coinciding with National Apprenticeship Week, Labor Secretary Thomas Perez will offer remarks and join Steve Clemons, Washington Editor-at-Large, National Journal in The Atlantic, for a moderated interview. The discussion will explore topics ranging from skills training for the modern workplace and workers' rights to collaborating with employers to help grow the American economy.
Please welcome the Honorable Thomas Perez, Secretary of Labor.
Good morning. Great to be here. Thank you for hosting this event, and it's an honor to be here with all of you and with folks out there in the Twitterverse to talk about what we're doing in the Obama administration to make sure we have a modern workforce development system. And I think it's important when we talk about this issue to provide context at the outset of where we were, where we've come, and where we need to go. When the president took office, the economy was hemorrhaging, as you know. In the 3 months before the president took office, 2 million jobs were lost. And now you look at where we are, the unemployment rate, 5.1%. We're in the middle of the longest streak of private sector job growth on record, 67 consecutive months to the tune of 13.2 million jobs. We'll know more about the last month this Friday. At the same time, we've seen other indicia of progress. In the depths of the recession, roughly 7 job seekers for every job opening. Now we have 1.4. You look at first-time claims for unemployment, and they continue to be at near historically low levels. But having said all that, there's no one at the White House or the Labor Department spiking the football because we know there is considerable unfinished business. Too many people still can't find work. Too many people are struggling to get by. Too many people working a 50-hour work week and getting their food at the food pantry. For so many people, our economy continues to be out of balance, where folks at the top have done great, and all too many people who help bake the cake of prosperity continue to struggle. And so making sure that the wind that's at our back results in shared prosperity, making sure that this rising tide lifts all the boats and not simply the yachts, is the unfinished business of this recovery. And one of the most important ways to do this is by investing in our people, empowering them with the skills and training they need to live out their highest and best dreams. As I've traveled the country during my 2+ years as Labor Secretary, I've met with a lot of business leaders, large businesses, small businesses. I've met with workers, I've met with labor leaders. And when I talk to business leaders, I feel like Groundhog Day. I have the same conversation, and it's a good conversation. I heard it at Boeing in Seattle. I heard it in an HVAC company in upstate New York. I heard it from the Manufacturing Council in Wisconsin. And you know what? Here's what I hear. Tom, I'm bullish about the future. I want to grow my business. And what I need as much as anything is that pipeline of skilled workers. Filling that pipeline has been at the very top of our agenda, and more than ever, we're doing it in collaboration with those employers. And it just stands to reason. If you want to help people get good jobs, it's a pretty good idea to get out there talking to the job creators. And so I think it's important, and we've done this, to get rid of the old model of workforce, which is what I used to call train and pray. You train widget makers and you pray that someone out there might be hiring widget makers. Today's approach is very demand-driven. We are responsive to the demand needs of employers, aligning our programs with those needs, arming people with the skills that are relevant to the opportunities that are actually available. We call that job-driven training. And at the end of the day, it's a win-win because the workforce system, in essence, has 2 clients. the workers who want the tools they need to punch their ticket to the middle class, and businesses who want to grow their business and get that world-class workforce to stay profitable and competitive. And so I often refer to the Department of Labor as Match.com. We match job seekers who want to punch that ticket to the middle class with businesses who want to grow. And this is an exciting time to be in this workforce business because we're really in the middle of a fundamental transformation in the way that we prepare people for 21st century jobs. I often refer to this as an Eisenhower moment. As you know, President Eisenhower brought us the interstate highway system. And today, we're embarking on a different type of infrastructure project, investing in our human capital infrastructure, constructing and modernizing that skills superhighway. The superhighway has all kinds of on-ramps and off-ramps where people can pick up stackable, portable credentials. The destination is the same for everyone, a middle-class job and economic stability, but there are a lot of different ways to get there. The superhighway also has dedicated lanes for people with specific needs, whether it's disconnected youth, people with disabilities, veterans, people coming out of the criminal justice system, and so much more. Because we believe that the economy works best and the nation is strongest when we field a full team, this skills superhighway is so critically important. There's so many aspects of that skills superhighway that I could spend literally hours on, and I won't because I look forward to talking to Steve. But I do want to focus in on one aspect of this skills superhighway, one on-ramp. And it's an area where I think there's a lot of gold to be mined, and that's the apprenticeship on-ramp. This is National Apprenticeship Week, as designated by the President. There are more than 200 events happening nationwide with companies like Ford, Alcoa, and Nestle holding activities and open houses. Pepperidge Farms is also celebrating. Not only are they known for goldfish crackers and the stuffing you have on Thanksgiving, but they're now also known for their apprenticeship work. So it's the perfect moment to talk about the issue. But the fact of the matter is that the Department of Labor, it's not just 1 week that's National Apprenticeship Week. Every single week is National Apprenticeship Week, and I want to applaud the dedicated career professionals doing great work there. And you know why they're doing great work? Because we know apprenticeship works. The earn while you learn model is tried and true. The average starting salary for an apprenticeship graduate is about $50,000 a year. And he or she, and we want to make sure we're saying more she, because historically it's been all too much he or she will earn over the course of their careers roughly $300,000 more on average in wages and benefits than their peers who didn't have an apprenticeship. On the employer side, apprenticeship is a great strategy for recruiting and retaining top-notch workers who keep the business productive and profitable. International studies show that for every dollar a company puts into apprenticeship, they get nearly $1.50 back in return. We need to move away from what I call the cannibalization model of human resources. I go steal your talent, you steal my talent. That's called zero-sum HR. We need to move to the apprenticeship model where we're building the pipeline and creating an ecosystem that allows for sustained prosperity. And all over the country, I'm seeing inspiring examples of people for whom apprenticeship has opened up windows and doors of opportunity. When I was out in San Francisco about a year ago, I met a guy named Anthony, and he went like this. He had a yellow thing in his hand, and he said, you know, Tom, I got the golden ticket. That's what my IBEW journeyman license gave me, the golden ticket to the middle class. I saw it in Boston. I've done a lot of work with Mayor Walsh, a leader in apprenticeship, who created a pre-apprenticeship program called Building Pathways when he was the head of the local building trades. It takes people from some of the city's poorest neighborhoods and communities, including public housing residents, including people who've had involvement in the criminal justice system, and it prepares them for a union apprenticeship that is a springboard to the middle class. We want to make sure apprenticeship is robust in every single zip code across this country. In Los Angeles, I met a young woman named Ladea Epps who grew up in foster care and has faced more than her share of adversity in her life. She bounced around a few jobs but was struggling to settle into a career. And then she went to a job fair and signed up for a union apprenticeship in construction. She went through a rigorous boot camp, and she kicked butt, frankly. And her peers told me that. And now she's got a great job on the crew building the new light rail system in Los Angeles, a system that's being built right in her community. And it's a job that's providing remarkable security for herself and her 3 kids. And Ladea's powerful story got the attention of the First Lady, and she had the opportunity to be her guest at last year's State of the Union. And for decades, we've seen apprenticeship at work like this, and we've seen the labor movement play a lead role. Unions, especially the building trades, have led the way, partnering with industry to help millions of people find career pathways. It's their work that has given apprenticeship such an impressive return on investment. And as they've continued to innovate in this space, the Painters Union, for instance, created in 2009 a credit awarding academic institution, which is essentially a college into itself. And now several other trades are exploring a similar step. The building trades also has a pre-apprenticeship program called Apprenticeship Readiness, a 3-week intensive course that allows students to bone up on core skills and helps them to qualify for apprenticeships. And it's produced real results with an apprenticeship placement rate of over 70%. What we want to do now is build upon this foundation that was laid by the building trades and other folks in the labor movement. We want to expand apprenticeship into other high growth areas like healthcare, IT, cybersecurity, fields that you don't normally associate with apprenticeship. When I was in Switzerland recently, the CEO of Zurich, a Fortune 100 company, he started out as an apprentice. And guess what? There's an apprenticeship program as a result of one of our grants in suburban Chicago that's training people on how to be claims adjusters right here at home. It has application to every different context. And by the way, Zurich is an active participant in that program, and I am very grateful. The president has set a very ambitious bar of doubling the number of registered apprentices in the coming years, and we are already making substantial progress, adding more than 70,000 apprentices nationwide, nearly a 20% increase in the last 2 years. But we've got to do more. We want to double and diversify. That is our mantra, double and diversify, making sure that apprenticeship opportunities are available to women, to communities of color, to underserved populations, and others who have struggled to navigate or access the skills superhighway. So last month, the president made a historic announcement, $175 million in the American Apprenticeship Grants, representing the largest ever federal investment in apprenticeship. There were 46 winners throughout the country, partnerships among employers, unions, nonprofits, local workforce boards, community colleges, and others. I was in Cleveland yesterday, where one of the beneficiaries of the grant will establish and expand apprenticeship for frontline workers in public transportation. All told, we anticipate the grants will create about 34,000 apprenticeship positions, but equally, if not more importantly, they are catalyzing new partnerships and innovation that will have a remarkable multiplier effect down the road. But in addition to these infusions of resources, it's important as we move forward to build and fortify the apprenticeship on-ramp to the skills superhighway to acknowledge that we need to effect something of a culture change, an apprenticeship, because we need to build a movement that changes people's assumptions and attitudes about apprenticeship, that affords this model the stature it deserves, the stature it enjoys in Germany, the stature it enjoys in Switzerland and elsewhere in the UK, and the stature that it all too frequently doesn't enjoy here. Shame on us for that fact. I have too many conversations with parents who say, you know what, I'm not sold on this. My kid's going to college. And you know what I tell them? Apprenticeship is the other college, except without the debt. And that's the reality of apprenticeship. When you spend $1 in federal money, you get a $27 return on investment. I don't know any, I know very little investments where we put $1 in and we get a $27 return. And as I pointed out before, when you go into these programs, we need to break out of this mindset that you either go to a college track or the apprenticeship track, because it's not an either or. It's a both and then some. The two can and should be very integrated. I mentioned the programs that were integrated in the building trades. So you finish your IBEW apprenticeship and you're 2/3 of the way or more to your associate's degree. So you're on that higher ed superhighway. a lot of local apprenticeship programs have built those relationships with local community colleges through what we call articulation agreements. We're taking that a step further with a new national network called the RAC, which is the Registered Apprenticeship College Consortium. And it already has 222 colleges, and it allows graduates of apprenticeship programs to take their years of on-the-job training and convert them into credits toward an associate's or a bachelor's degree at any of the member schools. So let's not set up that false choice between continuing your education or starting your career. It's not mutually exclusive. They, in fact, go hand in hand. And so as we take these important steps forward, there is indeed a lot we can learn and a lot we are learning from our friends from around the world. That's why I went to UK, Germany, Switzerland, and elsewhere. And by the way, the youth unemployment rate in Switzerland is 3.2%. Not hard to figure out why that youth unemployment rate is dramatically lower than the US. Same thing in Germany. We need to learn from those models and take those applications. And talking to Swiss employers, what I noticed right away is when they think of apprenticeship, they think of it not as a cost, but as an investment, one that they expect will reap dividends to the bottom line. The other big takeaway from my visits is the youth of the Swiss apprenticeships. I mean, I talked to so many of them. Some of them are going on to a wonderful career in welding. Some of them go on to higher ed. Some of them become the CEO of Zurich or other places. It's a very permeable system. You go where your talents and interests take you. And so there's no wrong road because of that permeability that they have seen. And so I think we need to build a similar superhighway where it's very easy to shift lanes, take detours, explore different routes. And so I'm looking forward to the conversation in the Q&A. And so let me just close by saying the following. We've got a remarkable opportunity. I see a lot of workforce folks in the audience, folks who've been spending their careers here. And I ask them, you know, folks who are longer in the tooth than me, when I go to these, and I will not name names, Martin, those folks, I ask, you know, you've been in this business for a long time. You know, how does this compare with how the world was 20 years ago in the workforce space? And to a person, what I hear is, this is the most exciting time to be in this place because we're part of a movement. It's not simply apprenticeship. There's an understanding. There's an alignment of forces. Employers coming together with labor unions, with community colleges, with other higher ed, with faith leaders, with nonprofits, with the federal, state, and local governments all working together. It's a remarkable opportunity. And it's an equally remarkable opportunity right now to build that apprenticeship on-ramp and to fortify it because it's an investment in the competitiveness of our businesses, the strength of our economy, and the potential of our people. And it has application across the economy. It offers a bright future for people who want to work with their hands, as well as for those who want to pursue a career in other industries, whether it's healthcare, IT, whatever. So whether your plan is to write code, drive trucks, fix sinks, take care of loved ones in a hospital setting, whether you're looking to hire someone with carpentry skills or computer programming skills, apprenticeship is a remarkable pathway. And we had a remarkable gathering at the White House just last month of CEOs, union leaders, and others in education and nonprofits elsewhere, all of whom have skin in the apprenticeship game, all of whom have experienced its success. And one employer, in response to the question that employers often ask, who don't use the model, how can I afford to do this as an employer? What that employer said so eloquently was, how can you afford not to do it? Because you have so much opportunity for growth. And one of your biggest challenges is building your workforce. And I believe we're on the cusp of a game-changing apprenticeship movement, which is a broader part of this skills superhighway. And I love talking to people like I did just this morning when I was in Maryland, talking to folks. Some, their career pathway has been pretty linear. Others, they've been on ramps and off ramps, and they've been to a number of places. All of them have a hop in their step because they see the opportunity that apprenticeship affords. And they say, you know what, I'm able to feed my family. I'm able to put away a little for college. I am able to help grow our economy. That's what this is about. And so let's make sure, and let's continue to muster and marshal the bipartisan spirit and energy that exists around this issue and build that movement. I'm confident we can, and I look forward to the questions and comments from Steve and all of you in the audience. Thank you very much for your time.
Now joining Secretary Perez is Steve Clemons, Washington Editor-at-Large, National Journal, The Atlantic.
Greetings, everybody. Has anybody in your job ever had as much energy as you do? And it's a little wild because it used to be the Secretary of Labor used to sort of be the dreariest member of the cabinet. I think you've changed that. How many of you, just to start out, I'm just interested because we've been talking a little bit about supercharging the apprentice program, supercharging skills. How many of you have been or were in some way in an apprentice program yourselves? I just want to see how much of a marketplace there is in Washington. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Any on this side? All the folks any on this side? So the middle, this matters to you 4. So put your 4 up again. So I just want to come back to you a little bit later because I want to ask you about your experiences with it and sort of look at what happens. So that might be a good read of the market share of apprenticeships in the United States. And, I think there's just no doubt that this is beginning to catch on, sort of toe in the door. But I guess my question is, with the amount of money the government is putting in this, and you are, out there as a cheerleader for the trend, why is it so hard if the results are so great? What is the reason that the employment base out there seems thus far to need to be seduced with money, your energy? What's stopping this from just becoming a kind of viral, everybody does it opportunity?
Well, I think there's some attitudinal barriers, Steve. I spend a lot of time in secondary schools, talking to guidance counselors, talking to superintendents, talking to parents. And when you say the issue of apprenticeship, all too frequently the answer is, no, my kid's going to college. And so we've got to adjust the attitude. And again, my mantra here is apprenticeship is the other college, except without the debt.
That's such a tweetable thing. I should say regarding tweet, for those of you who want to, particularly those watching live online, because we'll go to the audience and ask questions, but if you send your questions to #AskNJ, I'll try and get as many of them in. But yeah, tweeting that college without the debt is a smart apprenticeship. I was thinking about the White House, whether the president needed an apprentice, but I guess he does have Joe Biden. But not sure how that worked. But when you're out there and you're sort of talking about that dimension, and you look at the $175 million you put in it, if you get training wheels on the country bringing this along more, do you create a climate that apprenticeships only work if they get a tax credit, or do you think the logic of them begins to take over without a subsidy?
I think the ecosystem is already developing. You look at companies like Siemens, which is obviously has a global footprint. You go down to North Carolina and you go to a Siemens facility, and folks are walking around with an iPad. This is not your father or your mother's Oldsmobile. This is the modern landscape, and so the ecosystem is, the makings of an ecosystem are there, and what we've been doing, and I think it's as effective as anything, is taking those leaders, building this program, because the best sales job I can do for a company that's thinking about it, they know they have a worker shortage, they know they have growth potential, they don't know where they're going to get their workers from. The best thing I can do is bring in someone from Siemens or someone from Bueller, bless you, bless all of you, and say, and say, here, talk to Bueller, talk to, Ford, talk to this hospital system that's done it, and they will make the ROI for you. And there's so many studies that have been done on the return on investment for apprenticeship, and so we've got to make the business case, we've got to make the attitudinal case to parents, and what we're trying to do, our grant making is designed to be catalytic. And to bring together these partnerships. And that's exactly what we're seeing. We're seeding these partnerships, and it's exciting to watch them germinate.
You talk a little bit about, it really is sort of a stigma, attached to either apprenticeships. I've seen it in a lot of states where governors have been trying to get their workforce to re-embrace manufacturing. There's jobs coming back in the country, and you had second and third and fourth generation families that were in manufacturing got hollowed out. And so with their children, there's a bit of reticence about going back down. So is that does that take marketing, or does that take sort of a deeper conversation with the country so they don't look at these as vulnerable, fragile tracks where their kids will get screwed in the long run?
It takes a relentless focus and partnership. And one of the things I like about this is, in a town where we have all too frequent hyper-partisanship, this is just not a partisan issue. Governor Branstad in Iowa, working on this. Governor Haley, the tax credit that they passed in South Carolina, been very successful in bringing on companies like CVS. They take folks who are on TANF or food stamps, and they're giving them career pathways in pharmacy tech. Governor Malloy in Connecticut, very, very strong proponent. And when people start to see this, and word of mouth is the best marketer. And I was down in North Carolina, and I met this kid who's 23 years old. He was in they have Apprenticeship 2000. It's harder for a 16-year-old kid to get into Apprenticeship 2000 than it is to get into Harvard. Fact. And the thing I remember the most is he was 23 years old and he just bought his second house. I wanted to introduce him to my daughter. It was pretty remarkable. And so when that starts to get out, word of mouth is the best marketing, and we're not there yet. We're seeing pockets of success, but that's why the president's all in. And I think this is one of those issues that's going to have staying power because it really is nonpartisan. We've had meetings with the South Carolina leadership, and I applaud what they're doing. I spoke to Governor Branstad at the NGA summer meetings. They're doing great stuff, and Marty Walsh, the mayor of Boston, doing great work to make sure that young kids of color can get access to apprenticeship, because he understood that historically, it was white male, and he wants to change that. And and he's doing that.
I mean, you did so much of this and this thinking. I mean, I've known you for a long time in Maryland, and you just referred to a bunch of governors and mayors. Is there kind of a practicality of this that works at that level that somehow gets lost as you move up, not necessarily in the executive branch, but in Congress talking about these issues? I mean, the federal level, with all due respect to you, because it's not like you're, maybe getting stuff done that a lot of other folks aren't, doesn't seem to be a rich place where these things happen. But at the governor and mayoral level, with Democrat or Republican, you sort of see the fact that people are embracing this. Is this just something so compelling that it works better at that level than at a federal level?
Well, the workforce system, the public workforce system, is a joint venture between the federal, state, and local governments, between the business community, private sector, educators, nonprofits, and the challenges confronting the D.C. metro area are different from the challenges that are confronting Governor Branstad.
Right.
And the opportunities are different. But there are principles of general application. You have to be demand-driven. You have to have partnership that is meaningful. You have to take the job seeker where you find him or her, and construct systems that accept the fact that you've got some folks coming out of jail, you've got some folks who have a college degree and just need a little brushing up, you've got veterans, et cetera, et cetera. And we've had success working with those partnerships, building sector strategies, because the demand needs in Iowa are different from the demand needs in Connecticut. And when you build an ecosystem that's asking the right questions, that's building those partnerships, that to me is the best impact of what we've done at a federal level through our grant making and through our technical assistance, our employment and training administration. There are remarkable people there who have worked in local workforce systems. Right. So it's not an academic exercise from an ivory tower.
What are we doing with those people that have been incarcerated and come out? I mean, there's a ton of attention on that right now. My colleague Ta-Nehisi Coates has been zeroing in on that. I've had Rand Paul, Cory Booker, Tim Scott all talking to the fact that we have people coming out of prisons. Well, one, we have too many people in prisons, but secondly, we don't have a system set up that has trained and created on-ramps into employment. We have kind of an ongoing punishment, if you will, for people there. Yeah. What do you think is healthy that we're doing to fix that problem?
Well, we're addressing the long-term issue by addressing this problem of over-incarceration. Let's start building schools instead of prisons.
Right.
And that's been the president's approach. We've also been making sure, and this is some of the work that I'm most excited and proud of at the Department of Labor, is some of the partnership we've done with DOJ and elsewhere to make sure that people are ready to succeed when they get out of jail. And one of the most important ways to prevent recidivism is to make sure people have the skills and opportunity to get a job.
Would seem logical.
And so I'll give you one example of something that we did through our grant making. When I was in local government in Montgomery County, Maryland, we had a one-stop in the county jail because the vast majority of folks coming out of facilities are coming out of state, city, county facilities. By tremendous amounts. And they're serving on average no more than about 18 months. So we built a one-stop in the county jail. And we had employers coming in, and I'll tell you, I talked to employers, like in the trades. They want someone who is a skilled welder, will show up on time and be reliable. The most prolific private employer in the state of Maryland is Johns Hopkins. The most prolific employer of former offenders is Johns Hopkins, and they have studied this. The return on investment is remarkable, and they're employed as allied health professionals, phlebotomists, all up and down the food chain.
Sure.
And so we actually gave out a grant. We had a competitive grant competition, and roughly 25 jurisdictions are now replicating the Montgomery County model across the country, and we're working with philanthropy because we had such demand for this. It's another example of why I love my job, because this is bipartisan. You look at the bill that was just introduced in Congress to address the broader issue of over-incarceration, and then you look at what we're doing in this space. There's tremendous opportunity.
It's a remarkable shift.
Because America works best when we field a full team. And America's a nation that believes in second chances.
Let me just ask, any of you in human resources departments, any human resource directors here? One, two, not many want to admit it, but so don't take offense by what I'm about to say. But Jim McKelvey is a guy I've gotten to know as a co-founder of a company called Square with Jack Dorsey, and he has created an NGO called Launch Code. And this isn't an apprentice program, but it is taking people that have been trained one way or another. Maybe it didn't work out, or they're kind of problematic hires. They're people that need a second chance and kind of strengthen their coding skills. And then he tries to get them employed, and sort of in St. Louis, in Miami, and other places. But particularly the impact has been dramatic. Placed about 400 people in the St. Louis, Missouri area. His comment is, the challenge in talking about upgrading skills is one dimension, but you can fool people into going down this route. But if human resources departments won't take risks on the second chance people, or the people that have some wobbliness in their resume, that they won't happen. So he's used his sort of celebrity status as an IT entrepreneur to call CEOs and to pound them to push their human resources departments to be more expansive and to try to experiment with some other patterns. And I'm wondering if you've run it, because that's a different story than we hear in the media, that we have to upgrade people's skills. You can upgrade people's skills and yet not see the employment decisions, because human resources departments are more risk averse than Washington, D.C.
Well, two examples, and in defense of HR directors, I've spent a lot of time with them.
This is a great HR director.
And they've been incredibly constructive. Example number one, when we were dealing with the crisis of the long-term unemployed, and we're making progress, but we still have work to do, the president met with a number of CEOs, and 300 or 400 companies signed a pledge to address best practices. And we worked with Deloitte, who built a playbook, and I applaud Deloitte for this. And here's what one CEO of a Fortune 100 company said. As a matter of practice, they do a credit check on everyone they hired. And so what they were finding was they would make an offer, they do a credit check, and guess what happens if you've been unemployed for 18 months? You had some bills you couldn't pay. You had unconscionable choices to make. You weren't morally bankrupt. You were out of money. And what they found was this was a filter that was preventing them from hiring. So they changed it. And so now we're seeing many other companies that are changing those practices. And we've made tremendous progress because we've been able to sit down with CEOs and HR directors to address this. In the former offender context, the movement to ban the box, which is a bipartisan movement. Governor of Georgia, governors elsewhere, the city of Baltimore, et cetera. that's another movement that really stands for the proposition that, give these folks a chance to get their foot in the door. And so, again, I think we're seeing attitudinal changes. And I think it's a quintessential American value. We believe in second chances. And I've talked to so many employers who do this, and they're proud of it. And it is not an act of charity. It's an act of enlightened self-interest.
So, to get to that, you talked about gender balance, hiring more women in apprentice programs, hiring more women in general. I think women, we see this debate going on between people like Sheryl Sandberg with Lean In and my friend Anne Marie Slaughter with her article in The Atlantic called Why Women Still Can't Have It All. So there's the gender issues, there are folks of color in which we have seen a built-in bias historically in that you've been dealing a lot with LGBT issues. If you go to the places that hire lots of women, have women on their boards of directors, if you go to places that are much more inclusive, go to places with LGBT employment, you see, there's just data that shows that they perform better, that there's actually an economic cost to not having an inclusive workforce. Why, again, do you think it takes the work of people like you to sell something and push something that the economic costs of not going towards a more enlightened, inclusive direction are happening? So,
well, I still think, first of all, when in the world of false choices, the notion that we either have diversity or we have competence is one of the most, textbook examples of a false choice, which is frankly offensive. And I think part of the reason it's been as slow as it has, when you look at numbers, is if I were to do a survey here of how folks get hired, and I think this is also true for how folks get on boards, the most frequent answer to that question is the informal grapevine.
Networks.
In my experience, the informal grapevine has not been friendly for people of color and women. That has not worked as well for them. And so we need to move away from that informal grapevine. Well, I'm going to hire you because I know you. Our kids went to school together. We belong to the same country club, and move into a world in which people are truly judged by the.
It just sounds weird that in 2015 we're still having to fight that fight.
Well, as Ted Kennedy, a guy I had the privilege of working for, said, civil rights remains the unfinished business of America. And while he has not been on the earth, for 5 years, although he's always in my mind, I think that statement is a timeless statement. Yeah. And we've made tremendous progress, and we don't want to ignore the progress that we have made. It's undeniable, and it's on the backs of people who've made remarkable sacrifices. But it's equally undeniable. And that's why in our world of apprenticeship, we're not simply trying to grow the quantity of apprenticeship. We're trying to change the face of apprenticeship because, zip code should never determine destiny in our country. And when you see folks who are getting into these apprenticeship programs, they're punching their ticket to middle class. And I want to make sure that, if you live in the heart of Boston or you live in the heart of Baltimore, that you have the same opportunities as folks elsewhere had in that context.
One of the reasons why I like apprenticeship so much is because it gets through the back door at something that's been evolving, as I see in the U.S. economy, is there's a tension between learning and credentials. And the apprenticeship almost guarantees learning, but it brings on, as you said, portable credentials. But I talked to Jeff Weiner, the CEO of LinkedIn, and I said, what's your biggest challenge in this? He says, one of the biggest areas that we need to make a place like LinkedIn work is for people with middle skills jobs. How do they show what they've done? How do you have portable credentials that matter? How do you convey? And they found lots of unique ways for people to do that. How do you make a dent in Detroit, which is a stressed labor market, and move into that front? And so as you look into it as sort of the Wizard of Oz of the labor world, what do you think
Not sure that's a compliment.
Well, no, it is. It's in my world, it's a big compliment. But you see so much of what's happening out there, and you're embracing apprenticeships strongly. But what about this kind of broader array of middle skills and credentialing that seems to be a harder grab for mayors. I mean, I know it's just a big slog, and I'm wondering what else do you think needs to be, as you think 10 years from now, what else needs to be on the docket to change the game for middle skill employees around the country?
Let me just, I have a slight pet peeve, and I don't
go
mean
ahead.
that disrespect. I don't
Go ahead.
like the word middle skill, because I sit
I'm
in
quoting
those-
Jeff Weiner, so
and
your
I
complaint
sit
is
and I
with him.
look at the folks doing those jobs, and they are really incredibly skilled. I'd call it middle wage jobs.
Okay.
So having
So
said
if you,
that,
if you tweet or quote that, that's Jeff Weiner, CEO of LinkedIn,
Yeah.
not Steve Clemens.
I think we need to appreciate better the notion of competencies.
Right.
The more I speak to employers, and the more, there's a lot of employers that are justifiably angry at four-year higher ed especially, because they keep telling me, I got this person with this resume that said that he or she had this major in X. I hear this a lot in the IT context, and they come to work for us and they just don't have the basic competencies. And what I love about apprenticeship, and frankly what I love about our partnerships with community colleges, Steve, is that when folks come out with that certificate, or when folks come out with the Journey Person IBW certificate, they know what industry needs because they're working side by side. And I hear from four-year higher ed, well, but I want to teach critical thinking. And that's another false choice. You can teach critical skills and critical thinking.
Absolutely.
It's not either or. And so we need to, looking down the road, we need to do a better job of acknowledging and validating competencies that people have. And that's what apprenticeship gives you, is not only skills and certificates, but competencies. And that's why you talk to companies who are active in apprenticeship, they love it because they know that that person with that certificate is walking in the door, and there's a very high probability that they're going to be ready to rock and roll.
Great. Let's go to the audience for questions, and I want to ask my apprentice friends here, if any of you have a question you want to pose, I want to give you special status. Right? Were you an apprentice? No. Oh, you weren't, so we'll come to you next. Weren't you an apprentice? I was an intern. You were an intern? Well, that's different, right? We were all interns. Free labor, right? There's actually a question here saying from Lisa Ferguson, how to move away from unpaid internships that exclude low-income students and don't lead to permanent employment. I mean, that's one quick. I mean, let's go through a bunch of questions, but is that one of your priorities?
Sure. I mean,
Washington is built on unpaid internships.
Life happens, and you got to take the job seeker where you find them.
Right.
Apprenticeship is elusive for some if you can't get paid because you got to feed your family, and that's why we're trying to get more to buy into the earn while you learn model.
All right, I should say at Atlantic Media, we don't have any unpaid internships, so we believe strongly that everyone should have that. But yeah, this gentleman right here, we're going to go fast questions and fast answers. Do we have a microphone? I guess we've got to walk over to it. My apologies.
No.
Thank you, Blake. Yes, go ahead.
Rudy Arredondo with the National Latino Farmers and Ranchers.
Yes.
Mr. Secretary, it's good seeing
Rudy.
you. One of the things that I wanted to talk with you is with regard to your Farm Worker Opportunity program. And I have, for the longest time, as a president of the National Latino Farmers and Ranchers, attempted to work with the groups that are working in that. And I believe strongly that it needs to be re-engineered because a lot of the farm workers are actually farmers without land. And I think it would be very useful to try to do a collaboration with them.
Great, thank you. Thoughts on Farm Workers Program and shifting it about?
Well, I certainly look forward to that discussion. Farm workers have been taking it on the chin in no small measure because many of our laws not simply ignore them, but they deliberately leave them out of critical protections, and that's grossly unfair. And I've done a lot of work with things called the Equitable Food Initiative, which is leveraging supply chains to help lift wages and working conditions. So, you buy a strawberry from Costco, you can have confidence that the person that picked that strawberry was paid a decent wage and had acceptable working conditions. And those are the types of examples of things that we're trying to do to create shared prosperity across sectors by leveraging purchasing power that large purchasers have.
Supply chains matter. Let me go here to Kate Hudson and Ron Ham. They ask a related. Kate asks, can apprenticeships integrate with what she calls vocational education? I would call it career technical education infrastructure in the United States. And Ron says, what specific advice would you offer to community colleges wanting to galvanize apprenticeship opportunities? So bridging that arena of partnerships that can
Sure.
help, as you said, turbocharge apprenticeship expansion.
Well, the short answer is they can and are.
Right.
You look at North Carolina Apprenticeship 2000, and it's a remarkable partnership. Kids in high school coming out. They had a 23-year-old kid who's bought 2 houses. I was at his employer, and his whole model of growth is Apprenticeship 2000. As it relates to community colleges, one thing I would invite them to do is join the RAC, our Registered Apprenticeship Community College Consortium, because what this is basically an articulation agreement. So that person completes the apprenticeship program, the community college will then articulate those credits, and you're 2/3, 3/4 of the way to your associate's degree. And again, it's a compelling example of how this is not either or.
Have you been down to Miami-Dade?
Oh,
I mean,
Eduardo
that's a
Padron,
huge. Eduardo Padron has
it's
an incredible program.
175,000 people.
He's got to be your biggest cheerleader.
You go, I'm his biggest cheerleader. He's a force of nature. You go to anywhere in Miami and you talk to the folks in the banking community, you talk to all the movers and shakers in South Florida, and he'll put his arm around you and he'll say, yeah, he came through Miami-Dade. Yeah, she came through Miami-Dade. And it's that college has been a
Yeah, he's like the
remarkable
godfather
pipeline.
down there, right?
Yeah,
But what I love about Eduardo is he embraces strongly apprenticeships, embraces broadly these partnerships with the private sector, but also continuing it. I mean, just knocking education out of the notion that it's just a 4-year credentialing process. It's through every aspect, people short-term, long-term, continuing education. And I'm wondering, do you and Arnie Duncan sit down and sort of talk about how you interact and how to change what education means, what continuing education means, and what it means in the labor front?
Absolutely, and I would add the president to that conversation.
Does the president drill down on these issues?
Oh, absolutely, because what the president understands, and I think the biggest attitudinal adjustment we have to do with a lot of parents is there are multiple pathways to prosperity. And apprenticeship is one, a 4-year degree is another, community college, et cetera. And with the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, that is a joint venture between the Department of Education and the Department of Labor. And what it does is it embeds the collaboration between the two agencies. And historically, the collaboration was a bit spotty. I think it's gotten a lot better. And one more quick example, we've done a lot of collaboration on the redesign of high school, including but not limited to career and technical education. So the 6-year high school model that some of you in the audience and on Twitter may have seen in P-Tech Academy in Brooklyn. That is a remarkable example of how to create pathways to the middle class for so many people. A 6-year program at the end of which you've gotten a free associate's degree. I went to Sarah Good Academy in Chicago with Mayor Emanuel, and that school there is high minority, high poverty, high performing. And IBM is the partner there. The model is totally scalable. We gave out $100 or $150 million in grants to catalyze further scaling of the model. So it's a great opportunity.
Other questions, comments this side of the room?
Right.
Yes, right. Go ahead. Oh, and I apologize. I should
Okay, no worries.
Yes, hi.
Hi, my name is Kessie Stribling, and I'm the CEO of KSG Strategic Consulting. Because of a personal passion with helping young people create these career development
Right.
skills, we launched the Career Exploration Series. During your comments, which are awesome and very helpful to us, I hear you talking about the 20-something gentlemen, some of the folks who are graduating high school, but one of the populations that we're trying to help are folks who are in that junior high school period. Those individuals who need mentors, who can then help
Great.
them maximize those partnerships and get apprenticeships. Any best practices or suggestions for
Great
doing that?
question.
No, I mean, we're talking about apprenticeship and those things, but this is a cradle to career enterprise. And for all too many people, the pipeline springs a hole by the time you're in 8th grade. For all too many girls, they've decided that they're dumb in math, and they're not.
Right.
And so that's why, mentoring and all of those experiential learning opportunities, we need to keep moving them earlier and earlier so the light bulb can go off. And thank you for the work that you're doing to make sure that pipeline is fortified.
So we have 26 seconds, but I'm probably going to add 2 minutes to the clock because I was over a little bit late. But really fast, don't be nice, just zinger question.
Okay, I'm in Ward 8, and a lot of what you're saying is very good. I just want to know, how are you going to make sure that, because if you can model it in Ward 8, you can model it nationally. So what you're talking about, apprenticeships, life skills, how do we start that now?
That's what I call a zinger question. Yeah.
Well, I would invite you to look at what our grant proposal said in the apprenticeship context. If you didn't have a plan for ensuring that apprenticeship was accessible to everyone, then chances are you weren't going to get a grant. And that, this is about, doubling down and diversifying the face of apprenticeship. And it's a great opportunity to do so. IT being a notable example. So many partnerships. We were with Mayor Nutter in Philadelphia when we announced this grant proposal. He's taken kids in the Philadelphia public school system who love their gadgets and partnered with employers who have IT needs, and they now have pathways to the middle class in coding, and then the sky's the limit.
I should say that issue, which is important. It's important. I'm working with. I'm doing a thing tonight with Senator Lamar Alexander, Joe Manchin, Chuck Schumer on looking at distressed areas in the country that somehow don't find themselves on the highways for these discussions. So I wish we could do a whole conference on that someday. Yes, sir.
Reamer, George
Andy, how
Washington
are you?
University.
Really fast?
Yep. In the construction of the skills superhighway and the job-driven training, what's the role of data and information in your mind? And what's your assessment of the current state of data information in helping those structures work, and what needs to be improved?
The short answer is it's indispensable. When you're doing sector strategies, trying to figure out what the demand needs are, if you don't make use of labor market information, then you're not going to make informed choices about what the demand needs are. And so it's an indispensable part of what we do. And we're constantly asking industry, what are the questions, and we're asking community colleges, all the stakeholders, are there things that we aren't capturing that we need to capture? So for instance, people who work part-time, we capture that, but some people are saying, well, perhaps you need to capture it in a different way. And so I welcome feedback from you and other stakeholders about data that you think we
He's
should
really
be
good
doing
on
better.
data. I can vouch for him. I apologize, everybody. This has to be our last quick question because we're just out of time. I apologize. Sorry, Ken. You're a friend. I don't mean to cut you off, but there's no more time. Yes.
Heather Foote, consultant with Iona Senior Services. What was your voice at the White House Conference on Aging, and how does what you've been talking about relate to the still low statistics for people over 60 getting into the workforce? I volunteered with Age Friendly DC, which is under the umbrella of AARP and World Health Organization, and the surveys showed in this city, Ward 8 and other places.
Thank you. Oh, we got to cut it there. So
Yeah,
aging in the workforce,
Sure.
great question.
The bottom line is people are working longer because they have to. The recession turned their 401ks, to the extent they had them, into a 201k. And so we do a lot of work to make sure, and the long-term unemployed who lost their work, so many of them told me that they're having trouble finding a job because they firmly believe that age was the biggest barrier. And so we've done a lot of work with employers to make sure they're taking a second chance. We obviously have sister agencies enforcing the ADEA, and we're also working with targeted investments in our workforce system to make sure that folks, regardless of their age, can have a meaningful opportunity to continue to participate.
Tom, just to close up, and I'm going to call you Tom because I want you to take your Secretary of Labor hat off. And imagine yourself as a journalist at a presidential debate with a Republican and Democratic candidate for President of the United States, and you were moderating. Yep. What would be the question that you think should be posed to the next president that would be most illustrative of whether they have an enlightened approach to these labor issues or not? How would you set up the question and challenge to who will lead the country on whether they get it or they don't?
I think you have to, everybody, I think, shares the proposition that education is a great equalizer.
So that's easy.
for me, I learned at an early age that budgets are moral documents. They reflect the values and
Budgets are
priorities
that's a tweetable line I want to
of
tell
a community.
Yeah.
And so, I'm frustrated right now. I got to be honest with you. The Senate Republican bill cut funding for apprenticeship on the heels of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which is an overwhelmingly bipartisan bill. So you can't say on the one hand, apprenticeship is good, and on the other hand, whenever someone tells me I like issue X, the first thing I always do is I look at the budget, because that really tells me whether you like issue X. A generation ago, you look at the OECD data, and you do that, Steve, data. We were on top of the world on education. We're now 13th or 14th among OECD nations, and that's how we maintain our competitive edge. So what are you going to do in early childhood? Because we know what the data shows there. What are you going to do for that 58-year-old who lost her job and needs some upskilling? What are you going to do in the apprenticeship context? What are you doing for Ward 8 residents for whom there have been chronic opportunity gaps? And, we keep saying we can't afford to. Well, you know what? We can't afford not to. And when you say it's costly, you also have to look at the cost of doing nothing, because that's what happens all too frequently. The return on investment in this conversation is off the charts. And you can't have a rule that says, I don't invest in anything. We can't have fairy dust theories of growth, where fairy dust comes down, it builds our roads, it builds our bridges, it educates our children. That doesn't work in The Wizard of Oz, it doesn't work in Alice in Wonderland, and it can't be our strategy. That's like dust and prey, and that ain't who we are.
Well,
so that's the question I would be asking.
Mr. Secretary, I don't know how good a journalist you would be at a debate with that, but I can tell
I don't think I'd be allowed to do the debate.
But I think it'd be a hell of an answer. I think you'd be a hell of a person on this stage in a debate. So, ladies and gentlemen, Secretary of Labor Thomas Perez, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Steve. You're a good questioner.